Hey guys, Booligan here with Booligan Shooting Sports. Today, we are talking Smith & Wessons. In particular, we're looking at my third generation Smith & Wesson 9mm model 5906. A little bit about Smith & Wesson's semi-automatic handgun series. These particular types of guns came in three separate generations. The oldest generations dated back to the 1950s. The third generation was produced until the year 2010. So these things had a very long lifespan. And of course, they went through different iterations along the way. The earliest ones that you would see were things like the Smith & Wesson Model 59. That would be their semi-automatic, hammer-fired, double action. They were good handguns. They were produced in the 1950s for quite some time. After that point, they made the Generation 2. The Generation 2, obviously, all of these have some iterative design and functional changes along the way, but the names changed along the way. So the first generation have two-digit numbers in them, the Model 39, I believe, and the Model 59. Then, for the second generation, you have three-digit numbers. Like the 459 is one and stuff like that. I'm not too well versed in the second generation. Third generation, just add another digit. That's a great way when you are deciding how to name and number your models. And the third generation is really where Smith & Wesson went ham. They went crazy. You could get these models in like 30 different variations. You could get them in 9mm, in 40 Smith & Wesson. You could get them in 45 ACP. You could get them in 10mm. You could get them with stainless frames, with alloy frames, with a special single action only version, with a decocker only, with a decocker and a safety. You could get them two-tone finish. You could get them stainless on stainless. You could get them stainless on alloy. You could get them in a compact frame, in a full-size frame, in a single stack, in a double stack. They really just tried to create basically every permutation of that gun possible. Lucky Gunner has a fantastic resource for identifying those first through third generation Smith & Wesson pistols, and I'm going to provide a link to it in the description of this video if you would like to know more. That's just a little touch on the history of these things. Let's talk about mine. So the one that we're looking at today, as I said, is a model 5906. This is the model, or this variation of the model has the Novak fixed rear sights instead of the adjustable rear sight that has what's affectionately referred to as the elephant ear guard on the back. This realistically is one of the most common guns that you would see in movies and film involving law enforcement. The reason being, frankly, most law enforcement agencies, most major law enforcement agencies in big cities, I believe Chicago used them, I believe LAPD used them, and a couple of other major ones used these as standard issue sidearms. Because of that, when you were making a movie, you obviously wanted it to be as realistic as possible and accurate to what would be, properly carried. So these things were in a ton of movies and shows. And that's my first experience with the 5906 in particular. You may recognize these ones from Lethal Weapon is a prominent one that features them. But where I know the 5906 from is the X-Files. As a child born in the mid-1980s, the X-Files really did a lot for me growing up. I loved the X-Files. And for several seasons, your main characters utilized Model 5906 Smith & Wesson handguns. However, they generally did have the elephant ear adjustable sight models. I just don't like those. So that's why we have the Novak fixed sight version. A little bit about how these function, what they cost, and why you may want to add one to your collection. When most police departments had something like this, it was really a game changer for them. A lot of them were moving straight from a revolver to something like this. Now, this increased their magazine capacity, increased their functional, firearm usage that they could have. It increased their, ability to put a volume of fire downrange if needed. However, these are heavy, especially this version. This is a stainless on stainless version, so it's heavy. It's a chunky guy. It weighs, I think, about 7 or 8 ounces more than a comparable Glock 19. So it's heavy. They do have good magazine capacity. This one has a 15+1 capacity. They used them for a while. A lot of them used them for like a decade or so. And then the Glocks came. Now, a lot of law enforcement agencies, some of them did go to Berettas, but basically everybody went to Glocks. When they went to Glocks, what that did is that created a massive surplus market for these things. And you would find these just everywhere. Gun shows, you would find them for super cheap. You could find them on like AIM Surplus or Classic Firearms for just not a lot of money. So they became a good piece for people that want to collect either an inexpensive firearm or a former law enforcement use firearm. Now, unfortunately, that changeover has mainly been completed everywhere. So I ended up getting this one kind of at the tail end of that surplus market existing in 2020 and 2021. Firearm purchases went through the roof, and a lot of these surplus sources for inexpensive firearms have kind of dried up. However, you can still find things like these on Gunbroker, various pawn shops, or other local sources wherever you might normally find your gun. Functionally, I love how this thing works because it is a true double action, single action system. When you load it, we are operating off of an empty magazine. When you load it, you will see that the hammer is now cocked. What you would normally do then is drop the ambidextrous safety, which also functions as a decocker. Now, you can keep it with the safety on, or you can flip the safety back up. There actually are a couple of models that don't have a safety. They only have that decocker, so they automatically return. But now the gun is, where I do have ammunition in this magazine, is loaded and ready to shoot. That first trigger pull, again, this is on an empty chamber. We checked that magazine. That first trigger pull is going to be long and heavy because, as you can see, it is cocking the hammer back as it goes. And then it fires. So when it would then fire, it would then reciprocate the slide, eject the spent casing, and load a fresh one in. But now your hammer is cocked. So your subsequent trigger pulls are much lighter. You don't have that long, heavy take up because you're not cocking the hammer back, and much easier to shoot. The idea being you want to carry it with one in the chamber, but with the hammer down, so that when you draw and shoot, that first shot is very, very deliberate. You have a long, heavy trigger pull as it takes up that hammer and then shoots. And then any subsequent shots after that are nice and easy. One reason why I really, really like a true double action, a little oil coming off this guy, you need to keep these things well lubricated. Why I like a true double action system like this is that, say you have a light primer strike, or you have just a finicky primer or something along those lines that isn't firing when you first pull the trigger. We'll just pull the trigger again. You don't have to recock anything manually. You don't have to eject it unless you give it 1 or 2 trigger pulls and it's still not shooting. Then you still have just a good option to just keep pulling that trigger until you get that primer to fire. That happens sometimes with some ammo. If you're using quality ammo, it's less of a concern, but still, it is a thing that happens. And that's one thing I really, really like about true double action pistols like this, is that you can just keep pulling the trigger, keep getting hammer strikes on that in the event of a malfunction. So in closing on this, again, the reason why I bought this is because one of the first handguns I ever shot was a Model 59. So I have, a good ingrained connection with these Smith & Wesson, Wonder 9 pistols. But when this particular one from a, TV show of my childhood came across my screen, I had to buy it. I paid like $300 for it. It was a pretty good deal for what these normally go for, and I really, really, really like the thing. Will I carry it? No, because it's heavy, it's bulky. There are much better carry options these days. However, that's just for me because I have a lot of other carry options to choose from. If you didn't, one of these could be a good option to carry if you didn't have access to something that maybe was a little bit lighter or a little bit, just less bulky for what you're getting as far as like ammo capacity and things like that. But again, these really aren't bad carry options. They're just kind of chunky. There's a reason that these rode in basically every major city's cops holsters for a decade. But this guy will definitely be added into my range rotation, and we'll get a range video on it to see how it shoots. See the real benefit of the fact that it is kind of a fat boy with its heavy frame. Helps absorb some of that recoil and does tend to make these very, very smooth and good shooters. So yeah, like I said, I purchased this guy privately, found it on Utah Gun Exchange, which I am very lucky in that I have that as a resource because I find so many amazing things on Utah Gun Exchange. But I found it, I added it to the collection, and I love it. So now I can LARP like I am a less attractive David Duchovny and get my X-Files on. So thanks for watching.